Okay, welcome to Thursdays with Franco. It's the 20th of October, and we're right in the middle of Oracle Cloud World. Hey, Darren, how are you?
I'm excellent, thank you. Yeah, I've been struggling to get across all the new announcements. Some really interesting things coming out.
And so we're not going to go through a lot of those because this is a very small little snippet. But is there anything you want to, talk about that's got you excited about what you've heard at Cloud World?
Yeah, so 23C database looks really, really interesting. So that's the next major release that's going to come out, so long-term release. Interestingly, they're skipping 22 to really focus on 23 and get that bedded down for a long-term release. But the other one was the announcement around shared databases that's coming to Autonomous Data Warehouse, where you can actually keep your database in different data centers and then share that from a centralized reporting perspective. So I've seen that capability being asked for a number of customers fairly recently. So I think that'll be a really good addition to the capability we have with ADW.
And I listened to Larry speak yesterday, and he did a lot of talking around what Oracle's doing around healthcare and some of the incredibly, ridiculously hard problems that are out there. And Larry's talking about having these country-wide healthcare HR electronic health records, and then also looking at having one for the planet. It was interesting. He talked about, it doesn't matter where you are across the planet. There's your last so many credit transactions, your credit rating. Yeah, and he talked
no medical records.
Correct. If they wanted to know how much money you're earning or how much you've just spent, or if you could buy a $20,000 watch, yes, we can give that to you. But do they have information about what sort of medication you can or can't take? And then he also talked about a lot of the ways they've been able to achieve things so aggressively. It's because of what have they been able to do with Autonomous and Apex. And it's like he's doing a promo for our Thursdays with Franco session.
Absolutely, yeah. Covering those at a scale,
Correct.
Centralized medical record, you need a lot of processing power to maintain that.
Correct. So let's get into today's topic. So thank you, Darren, for suggesting we talk about the analytics add-in, the Excel add-in, giving you access to another view of analytics. So can you tell me about this?
Sure. Let me just actually share a slide. All right. So what we're going to cover today is the Excel plugin we've made available for Autonomous Data Warehouse. It's a different approach to being able to get access to that information. So I know I've done a couple of sessions on Thursdays with Franco around Oracle Analytics Cloud. We've had Apex. So all of these provide us simple and easy ways to be able to access the information. What we're doing here is a lot of people are really comfortable in Excel. It's a sort of more self-service, allowing people to be able to analyze data very quickly. Certainly in a lot of customers where they have these enterprise reporting tools, I find some of the people are actually more comfortable just downloading the data into Excel and actually, being able to do some of the analysis rather than using the power that we all as vendors deliver in those analytics tools themselves. So what we're trying to do here is provide a really simple way for users of Excel to be able to interact with the actual Autonomous Data Warehouse. So we're going to go through two main interfaces. We have what's called a direct SQL interface. So you can just write your own SQL code and be able to connect to the tables and join them yourselves. Or, what we're seeing is this new sort of paradigm around data mesh, data fabric, people having data all over the place. We talked a little bit now about that shared capability coming in ADW. So there's also a mechanism in the database. It's actually been available since 12C release called Analytic Views. So you can actually go and create the structure in the database, hide the complexity from the users. So pre-aggregates, pre-joins, and creates this sort of a cube representation, so facts and dimensions, and we'll go through that and then let's see how we can interact with that with Excel.
Cool. Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so the first thing I'm going to do is actually show you where to go ahead and download the actual plugin. So it's through the the database tools that we make available, database actions, you may know them as well. So, we'll go through, I'll log in, we'll download it, and then we'll go and add that as a plugin into Excel before we then go off and actually load some data and show you how that works in the back end.
That's great.
All right, let me just do a new share to. Okay, so let's actually just start this from here. All right, so what I've done here is I've logged into a ADW instance that we have available. Actually, just go back one more page. So highlighting here that ADW does come in a different set of flavors. So the Oracle database is multimodal. It supports, graph, spatial, JSON. So, you can have it as a single entity to be able to cover all of those. Or when you spin it up, switching a couple of parameters, you can actually have all those different. So we've got an example here of a transaction processing database, what we call ATP. We've got the autonomous data warehouse, or ADW, and then we also have a JSON flavor. So you can actually get a JSON version. You can also spin up one which has just got Apex. So different ways of actually interacting with these various components if you wanted to. So if I log into my ADW, all right, you can see a whole bunch of information around here. So, 6 CPUs, 1 terabyte of storage. Here's an Apex instance we stood up. We've talked about data safe before. Encryption, the data in the database is always encrypted. You can do it as we control it, with Oracle controlling the keys, which you've done here, or you can actually bring your own keys. But where we want to focus today is on these database actions. So I'm just going to launch the database action page. It'll automatically log me in, or if I was getting something different, I could actually log in as a specific user. So I've come in as an admin. So you can see all the development tools. We've talked about the SQL interface. We can actually just write your SQL code. We've done a lot of sessions on Apex. We've done a bunch of sessions on REST or ORD's interaction with the database as well. What we probably want to be doing is something in Graph Studio coming up. We can also get through to our Spatial Studio. Administration here is where you sort of create users and control those. But really what we're going to focus is down here in this Data Studio area, where we're going to actually use some of the data load capabilities and some of the data analysis capabilities to make that information available to the plugin. Now, it took me a little while to find it. The download is actually on the right-hand side. So in this black area, you can actually see here, download the add-in for Excel. Now, when I download this, it is tied to this specific ADW instance. When you add the plugin to Excel, you don't have to worry about a wallet file or how to connect to the environment. When you download this, it'll have a manifest file that has all that information contained. So it's really simple and easy from an end user to be able to then add that to the environment and worry about that.
So it simplifies a lot of the handling of security, and the user still needs to put in a username and password.
They do,
but
correct.
In terms of having a wallet or understanding a machine or an IP address, all of that is handled for you.
Absolutely. Yep. So all you need is that username and password, and you're in.
That's cool.
Right. So let's pop across and just have a look and see where we've downloaded this. I've actually gone through and downloaded into my environment here.
It's like a cooked one.
Yeah, saving us a little bit of time. So what I've got here is, you can see this expanded zip file, because when you download, you just get a zip file with it in. And there's 3 files in here. So there's the installation. As I said, it's available for both Mac and Windows. So because I'm running on a Mac here, we've got an installation.sh file. I did talk about that manifest file. So if I open up the XML, it's got all the constructs, so it knows exactly how to connect to the database, and a bit of README. So first step is make sure your Excel is not running, so shut it down, and then you run the installer. All right.
Right.
Then we go back and open up Excel. So we hop across back to Excel. Okay. So I'm now in my Excel in dark mode, which some people don't like. I've been asked for a couple of customers, if I've done demos, switch it back to the light mode. It's easier for me, but I like the dark mode. So in here, blank spreadsheet, I can go through to the second menu item here. So insert, and you can see here, I can do things like get add-ins, or my add-ins. Because we ran that installation, it's already added it into my add-in. So I'll drop down that list. I've now got that Oracle Autonomous Data Warehouse add-in that we can actually then use. And normally what I do is I just click on this and execute that. I've already done that. So what that did is actually created this new add-in at the top. So you can see it's got the name, the Fort ADW that we're looking at. So it's already tied back to that environment. And as you said, if I do a sign in here, all I have to do is enter a username and a password.
Okay, we can't see that because of Zoom.
I popped up. Yep.
Right.
Okay. So what you'll notice here is when we connect, there's two interfaces we can use. There's this native SQL one, which is the first. So this is where you type in your own SQL code, go through and actually have to worry about the joins, how we can actually get those. But again, it's really simple for you to be able to get access to the data and interact with it using Excel, and I'll show you that shortly. The other one is what we call the query wizard here, and that's connecting back to, if you predefine that analytics view in the database, all you're doing then is, from an end user, is ticking the box and say, these are the fields I want. I don't have to worry about the code. It'll generate that automatically. It will allow me to do things like drill up and down within hierarchies, because it'll create hierarchies, dimensions, measures. All of those will be done for me very simple and very easily.
Very cool.
Right. So if we just go back now to the next step. So before we actually want to be able to do this, if I go back to my...
Is it about creating the analytic view, loading the data?
No, not yet. We're going to load the data first. So,
right.
Okay. So back to my PowerPoint. Yep. So the next thing we need to do is actually go through and actually load the data. So I'm going to come into that tool that I showed you from the studio perspective, and we're going to use the load data and actually go through and actually load from a local file. We can also get access to data stored in Oracle Object Storage. We can set the locations. We can use data coming from other databases. We can go off and actually feed it in different ways. So very simple and easy from an end user perspective to actually go ahead and actually load this information. So if I just go through and say, right, before we go back and look at Excel, let's now go back to those database tools we were in. Right, so we're back to our database tools that we saw just now. And as I said, if you remember, we're using the data studio piece. We've redone the download on the right-hand side. So I'm going to go into data load. Which is that screenshot I just showed you in PowerPoint. And as I said, we're going to load data. And initially, I'm going to do it just from a local file. So I've downloaded a couple of files. Click on next. If I go and select the files, you're not going to see that shortly, but I can now go off and actually select a number of different files. So I'm just going to bring up a country CSV. So we can upload CSV files, Parquet files, JSON files, Excel files, different components. So in here, I've just selected the file that was in my local file system called country. So a bunch of fields in there. And I just click on run, and that will then load the data for me into the environment.
Cool.
I've already done that, so I'm not going to actually execute it again. We're just going to go through and actually now, how do we use that in the actual tool itself? So go back to database actions, because I'm going to need that. So I'm going to switch back to PowerPoint now. All right, so what's the SQL interface look like? So here we've got, and I put it just on a slide just to make it a little bit bigger for people, easier to see rather than that smaller Excel spreadsheet. So what we've done here is on the right-hand side, you can see we've written a SQL query against those 4 tables I loaded. So we had a centralized fact table, we had some country data, we had some time data, and then we actually tracking the information. So what this data is all around, think of it kind of like a Netflix store. So people come to the store, they choose what movies they want to watch, they'll download those, whether they're watching it on their mobile device, on their smart TV. So we're tracking all that information, and then we're starting to actually start looking at sales by customer across times. We can bring in additional customer dimensions. So we use this data set quite a lot across some of our live labs. So it's just a nice simple way to be able to understand how the data actually is. So in here you can see the SQL query is selecting from countries, devices, months, days, and the actual sales fact table. So, it's not a complex SQL query. We just, bringing that information, and it's then automatically available for us in the Excel interface. So it's brought in the data in this sort of raw format, which is this movie sales tab that you're seeing at the bottom. It'll actually bring in detail around the tables that's used as well. But if I pop across to the next sheet 2 here, what it does is it actually generates a pivot table. So pivot table functionality in Excel makes it really simple and easy for an end user to sort of slice and dice data, looking in different ways, aggregating. So in here on the UI on the right-hand side, I can choose the data and filter it at whatever I want, what level. I can choose what's appearing in the columns in the view, what's appearing in the rows, and what's appearing in the actual data points themselves. So it's makes it really easy for the users to be able to then interact with this data and slice and dice it and look to see how they actually want to interact with it.
That's cool. So not only can you return the rows, it's aware of pivot table capability, and it will help you auto generate that as well.
It does, correct. Yep.
That's cool.
Right. Now, because we're in Excel, it's really simple and easy for us to be able to use all the rich functionality that people love about Excel. So I can start doing things like creating a calculated field. So this is just using native Excel functionality. We, not having to type back to the reporting tool and anything on those lines. So the calculated field, in this case, I'm creating an average price, sales divided by purchases. So it's going to give us this new component that we can then, drag and drop onto our pivot table or the actual component. And then we can use all the rich functionality around things like conditional formatting and be able to then analyze the information using Excel directly.
Cool.
Right. So that was maybe a little bit complex if you don't know how to write SQL.
Yeah.
Can we make it really simple and easy for users to be able to interact with this data without having to use that SQL interface? So that brings us back to those analytics views.
Yeah, that's interesting. So what you're talking about there is how do we make more use of data that's probably come from a few different places and bring it together so it becomes more aggregated or more richer with what's possible.
Yep, correct. Yep, we can hide the complexity of the joins, but also enrich the data with the additional calculations in the back end. You saw us using the calculation in Excel, but we can also do that in the actual analytics views as well.
Cool.
Certainly, if we've got users who aren't really comfortable creating those, we can provide them to very quickly, very easily.
Okay, let's see how that works.
Right. So the first thing we need to do is actually create that analytic view. So we're going to go back to the database tools and actually create a view based on those 4 tables that I loaded.
That sounds complicated.
It is really simple. It's click a couple of points and then tell it to go through, and you can see the screenshot here. And I'll actually run that for you. It does it automatically for you. So it does a really good first pass of finding all the actual tables and views that it wants to be able to generate. It'll actually allow you to say, are you happy with these? Do you want to change them? And then it'll actually show you the actual representation. So in this case, we've got that movie sales fact table in the middle. It's created a join to 4 different dimensions. So we've got the days, the months, the countries, and the devices. And then we can analyze sales across all these different dimensional values through a drag and drop process in the Excel interface.
Cool.
All right. So let's now pop back to our database tools.
So the example you've got is movies, and the fact tables there are things like countries, weeks, and days. But if I had something like support tickets or orders, I'd have things like customers and products and maybe stores and those sorts of things as being my dimension tables.
Correct. So pretty much anything you can think about.
Yeah.
We're just trying to put it into a simple format for end users to be able to interact with that data.
Yeah, that's starting to make more sense for me, because I saw it as something complicated, but you're actually saying if you think about what enriches or describes a data product like an order, then it's those dimension tables that help you do that. And I guess that's where things like, you hear those words, star schema can fit in as well.
Yeah, which is exactly that sort of screenshot I showed you just now with the
Yeah.
sort of central fact table and the 4 dimensions, that's exactly the star
Yeah.
schema representation we'd have.
Okay, so let's see where
Right.
is this analytic
So
views?
back into the tools that we were running, you saw us use the data load a short while ago.
Yeah.
I'm only use this data analysis tool.
Okay.
Right. At the moment, I've got no analytics views created. So let's go ahead and create a brand new one.
Yeah.
And the simple is, what are you choosing as your fact table? So when I loaded the full data, it's a year's worth of movie data. Just to make my demo a little bit faster, I actually used, there was another transform tool that we have available. So I actually went, right, let's just look at 1 quarter's worth of data. Added a few transformations to add a couple of fields, etc. I've skipped that part of the demo. It is in the live lab. So I'm going to use the cut down version just to make this run a little bit faster. So all I had to do is select what I think is the fact table and then hit the button and it will go off and do all the hard work for me. So it's now running off and saying, let's analyze that to see if we can work out what are potential dimensions. Can I find any tables that join to that? So I can actually add those in. So it found 5 potential dimension tables. In those dimension tables, is there any sort of hierarchical nature to it? So if you think about time dimension, day might roll up into month, into year, or quarter, year, etc. If we had the country information, country might roll up into a region. So Australia rolls up to APAC. So we can actually go off and and it's done that automatically for me. It found 2 measures. So without actually having to do any heavy lifting, we've actually got that generated straight away.
So what you've just done there is you've created, you could say, a set of data products that are a lot friendlier for those sorts of query and reporting capability. And that's actually quite useful if I'm just doing SQL, if I'm just doing Oaks, as well as this will now support this capability in Excel.
Yep, so you can use Excel itself. You can use, obviously, as you said, the analytics tool, Oracle Analytics Cloud. You can use a third-party reporting tool if you wanted. So it's gone off and actually starting to look and say, can I see any data quality issues?
And you did that just using that little wizard capability, and it was smart enough to go ahead and look at for matching columns and then work out how to create not just the attributes that would be relevant, but also a hierarchy as well.
Absolutely. So we've got all the different components here. You can start looking at the actual fields we're using. We've got one here where we're actually looking at by customer segment. So the recent tech day, we used a lab where we went through and actually did this as a sort of more broader data lake perspective, and we added this in with the additional field. So it ties back to some of those demos that some others may have seen us do previously.
So what we're talking about here took about a minute or two. I've got people like Stuart Coggins saying, hey, I'm going to take the next 4 weeks to come up with this star schema design on the data. I think I need to go back and have a strong chat with Stu.
He's on mute, so he can't argue back on that one.
That's exactly the reason I'm bringing it up.
Right, so now let's pop back to our Excel plugin, and we're going to interact with this data itself. So,
and we've also had a question from Milos saying, is the Excel plugin available only in ADW?
It is currently, yes.
Right. So how far do you think we will see it in ATP?
I think we probably will, to be honest. So, because you can see the structure that we tend to generate with it is more of a star schema representation. Yeah. ADW is optimized to run queries a lot faster against star schemas. So, we've turned on all the features in the autonomous database to be able to then run those star schema queries really fast, really quick, get them back to the users. So that's probably why it's got a natural affinity to run in ADW rather than ATP. But yeah, I can see users wanting to be able to get that data out of ATP without having to move it into ADW. So certainly, yeah, that's something we'll raise with the product management and say, yeah, that's what people are looking for. Let's add the capability.
Cool.
Right, so let's go back to our PowerPoint. And now we're going to do is analyze the environment. So in Excel, and again, I've just put this here just to make it a little bigger for people to be able to see rather than run it directly. We now have that analytic view, and instead of having to write the SQL query that you saw me do for the first one, all I'm doing is ticking the box. So I'm looking at sales by time hierarchy. What are the levels in that time hierarchy is year, and we then hit the next button, and it'll actually just generate us being able to say now, are there any calculated items I want to create at this level? So here's a different one you saw previously. So sales by units. I can filter out the data. So instead of bringing back a full set of data, I can start with just a subset and then start drilling into a bit more detail. So we're creating those filters. And then it lands us back into that pivot table functionality that we had similar to the others. But you can see on the right-hand side, instead of having a, the SQL query generating those, that's come from the analytics view. Because we now have that live link back to the database side, you can see these little expand and collapse icons in here. So live, I can drill into the data and be able to then interact with it, but using Excel as my interface to be able to do that.
Very cool.
Right. So just to finish off, I thought we'd share a couple of items. Don't we want to drop these in the chat?
Yeah, might as well.
Let me just grab those. All right, I'll show you these live, but what we have is a blog. So come back to that, so I've got it. I'll drop them into chat, but there's a blog which is the same demo you've just seen me give. So the product manager has actually posted all the steps to be able to then do exactly what I've just demoed to you very quickly and very simply. To do that, you need the actual live lab, which actually loads all the data, does the analytics view as well. So, the Excel plugin is really just the Excel side of things, whereas the live lab is actually all the steps to actually load those data files, create the steps to do the analytic views. There's a whole bunch of additional transformations we didn't show, etc. But all those steps are then documented. So you can actually reenact what I've just shown you in your own environment very quickly and very easily.
Very good.
So let me just drop this to chat.
Cool. Well, thank you, Darren. That has been very good, taking us through the Excel add-in for the autonomous database. While you've been doing that, I did check the ATP console database actions, and the Excel add-in looks like it's there as well.
Oh, fantastic. That's
great.
Yeah.
So it's been able to quickly check that. Okay.